and welcome to the first episode of Crossover the Pond, where we take you on an NBA basketball journey, a short hezzy tween and stutter step away over here in the UK. I'm Josh Sexton, credentialed NBA media member, and I'm delighted to say that my co-host for these shows is a man who won a perfect 10 titles in British basketball, a former professional hooper himself who recently realised his NBA dream as an analyst with Amazon Prime Video Sport. My friend and yours, Mr. Drew Lasker. Drew, an amazing week for you to celebrate the NBA's return. How are you feeling about it all?
Man, I can't lie. I'm excited, to be able to live, my dream. My dream was always to make it to the NBA. Obviously, that goal was never reached as a player, but the universe just works in mysterious ways. And, to be able to work for NBA on Prime is just an absolute blessing. Yeah, I had my first game on Friday, calling the Lakers, Minnesota, and literally, the time in 3 a.m. was tough, but literally two lads talking hoops. I mean, what could you ask for? I'm just really, really appreciative. And I'm excited, man. This is a league that, I've followed my whole life, and to be able to have a reason to dive deeper into it is just incredible.
Absolutely. And speaking of two lads talking hoops, this is mine and Drew's new show, a new NBA show that we're going to be bringing to you, sort of trying to push ourselves more into that NBA space from over here in the UK. So you're going to be hearing a lot more of us. We're going to be trying for weekly episodes every Monday, diving deep into NBA topics. We're going to take the big things on. We're going to take some of the smaller topics on as well, because we don't want to make sure that anyone feels left out. So in episode 1, we are going to address some of the bigger talking points, literally in terms of size of some of the athletes that we're going to be talking about here. But as I say, we want to be fair to all teams, so we want to engage all fans of every team, because you all matter to us. So we'll be keeping it fresh every week with new talking points. To start off, though, as I mentioned, Drew, maybe the biggest talking point in terms of size of the subject we're referring to, Victor Wembanyama. Just another crazy highlight reel night for Victor last night. The biggest question now seems to be, how does anybody stop this man?
Great question. There is no way that you can stop him. I mean, he's 7'5", 7'6", whatever he is, because obviously it was reported that he had a growth spurt over the summer. And the best way to guard him is just to let him get his, because even if you send a double, you send a triple, he can see over everyone. He's an incredible passer. He has great vision. And I have just been really impressed with him so far. His summer was well documented, him spending time with the monks. And it just seemed like he just wanted to get in tune with it, with the mental side of it. We didn't see a lot of him in the gym. I'm pretty sure he did. He didn't post a lot. He worked a little bit with Akeem Olajuwon. But you could tell during game one that the mental switch hit, because you could tell that he's like he knows he's the guy now. His confidence is just oozing. Did you see that move he made on Dallas, where he came down, blocked it, he came on the other end, he danced with his step back 3 and 1-3, and it was like, okay, I'm here to stay. But what's been impressive about me is that he stopped settling. You look at his numbers right now, he's averaging 31 points, 14 rebounds, 6 blocks a game. But if you dive a little bit deeper, he's being more aggressive at the rim, averaging 10 free throws a game, which is 6 more than he averaged last year. And then the threes, right? It was well documented of him settling out from deep. Well, this year, last night, Sunday, he was 3 for 6 from three land, but he's taking 5 less threes a game. So he's imposing his will. During the preseason, I don't know if you remember, he made that move where he just kind of bulldozed whoever the player was to the rim. And so you heard the chants last night there in San Antonio, Wemby, and I think there might be some credence to it, man.
I think there absolutely is. Like you say, it was probably the one alteration he needed to make to his game. I guess was, you look at it with Chet Holmgren as well in terms of his size, his ability to beat up guys down low. You think of the most dominant centers of all time, guys like Shaquille O'Neal and Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson, and what those guys had was the ability to back down guys in the post. Obviously, you had guys like Olajuwon who had the quick feet and ability to get themselves out of the post. With Shaq, it was more like, pinning guys to the backboard. Maybe the same with David Robinson as well. So it's interesting that we're almost going back to that kind of centre now. We're in this era of the NBA where we are seeing more two big lineups and those kinds of things, and that needs a mix up of skill sets. And Wemby himself is being a part of some double big lineups with Luke Cornett, and that's where the outside game is of course going to help him. But then, like you say, Drew, we're seeing so much more of that inside game. We're going to see, I think, more of this season of him pinning guys to the backboard. We've already seen him, getting a poster on PJ Washington, making Anthony Davis look, silly in that first game, really. And Anthony Davis is one of the premier interior defenders in the NBA, even still, even with all of his health issues. He's not a guy that you want to see between you and the rim. But if Victor can continue to hone that side of his game, then it is scary. And listen, people have not necessarily tipped the San Antonio Spurs as title contenders this year. There's maybe some shooting and spacing issues still on that team, but the Spurs have been trying to get Wemby co-stars. De'Aaron Fox had some health issues coming into the season. I think when he comes back, you'll start to see that pick and roll between him and Wemby really coming into play. So I think there's still such a scary proposition, the San Antonio Spurs, thanks to just having this one guy really who is a complete and utter phenom.
Yeah, it's just crazy how, the NBA is full of fads, right? Nothing is forever. Things change so quickly. It was small ball, and then, the Rockets decided to go with that two big front lineup during the playoffs, and it's just such a copycat league. And it was funny because last night I was watching the starting five, which is incredible, by the way, if you haven't checked it out on Netflix. And, they were featuring SGA and Tyrese Halliburton. And my wife asked, what positions did they play? And I told her that they were both point guards. And she was like, wow, they're both tall. And I was like, yeah, this is the new NBA now. Like, point guards are 6'6", 6'7". And so, there was a remark made by, I can't remember who made the remark this summer, that said that it was KD actually that mentioned that, the 6 foot and under point guard is dead unless you're a special talent like Kyrie Irving. But things is transitioning to larger and larger lineups. And Wemby, it seemed like he got a brother that's in line as well. So, we might see some more 7'4" animals coming into the league in the future as well.
Yeah, that feels like the last thing that any of us need right now, especially me and you, Drew, who support two other teams out west. But we maybe come on to that at some other point, or at least touch on it throughout this show. I guess the biggest question always with a guy this tall will be injuries. Again, it was the thing that kept Chet Holmgren out for his first season in the NBA. It feels like it's always been, a determining factor. You look back to guys like Taco Fall, who didn't exactly come in to the NBA with any kind of phenom status or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the thing that's took Taco Fall out of the NBA, being a 7'6" guy, is that his body can't necessarily keep up with the demands of that. You even see it, you look back to guys like Manute Bol and stuff like that from, way back in the day. And again, it was injuries that stopped him being a complete phenom, probably in the way that people expected. You've already mentioned how well documented Wemby's NBA offseason was. He was out there training with the Monks. He was with Kevin Garnett and Hakeem Olajuwon as well. So clearly showing his respect to the greats that came before him. But it really feels like he's, not only on the mental side of things, but on the physical side of things, adopting that LeBron James approach where you put all your time, money, and effort into your recovery and your health. LeBron, I think at one point was sort of testifying that he was spending over $1 million on keeping himself conditioned and healthy, and maybe he's weaned back on the budget now a little bit, LeBron. But it seems like Wemby maybe hasn't done that. So would you still expect with a guy this big, Drew, there to be some issues, or do you think we really are seeing a sort of new era for the big man if he can get his mental and his physical right?
Well, I mean, obviously the science has improved within all major sports, but when you talk about someone of that size, injuries is inevitable. That's why if you're the San Antonio Spurs, I think it's important that you have urgency and win now. That's why they made that move for Fox, because you have to assume history repeats itself that, Wemby won't have a long career. If he does, it's great, but you have to assume that the feet issues will start kicking in, because those are the injuries typically with big guys are the feet, right? We just seen it with Durant last year, all the ankle injuries and feet injuries that he had at 7 feet. And so, um, with someone being that large of a target that is constantly moving, he's playing on all. He's you know contesting every shot defensively. He's sprinting up the floor. He's playing on the perimeter. He's playing inside. You just would have to think that even if it's not a normal injury, a freak injury is around the corner, and that's not me wishing it on him. That's just what we've seen in the history of the league. And so, if he can play, 55 games or more for his career, that I think that would be a success story. But I think if you're the Spurs, you got to be in win now mode.
Absolutely. Well, they are winning now. You can't say fairer
Three
than
and
that. They
zero.
are they are 3-0 to start the season. There's only four perfect teams in the NBA, two out east, two in the west. The guys out east have only played 2 games so far. That's the 76ers and the Chicago Bulls, which are maybe some unlikely stories. But again, we'll save that for the end of this episode, because I want to talk about those two at the top of the West. Drew, we've talked a little bit there about the San Antonio Spurs, mainly about, as I say, their phenom Victor Wembanyama, but the OKC Thunder are the other team that are up there, probably exactly where they're expected to be at this stage of the season. I imagine they will lose games. I would be very, very concerned if they weren't going to lose any games this season, but sort of transitioning from one phenom to another, although albeit, I guess, this is one that is arguably suffering from a popularity crisis to start the season, and maybe the mood sort of changed on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander towards the back end of last season too. He helped his team to what felt like a big win on opening night in double overtime against your Houston Rockets. So I'll be interested for your sort of fan assessment of that as well. But I'm interested with your analyst head on too, Drew, how you assessed that game from an OKC, from a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and from, I guess, two contenders going up against each other in the curtain raiser for the season. How you took, or what you took away from that?
That this is a team that now has that unwavering confidence now. That's what happens when you win a championship. It just gives you as an individual and you as a team, the shackles is off, the pressure is off, so now you could just really play. But then you always have that mindset that no matter what type of hole you're in, no matter what type of adversity comes to your team, that you can always find a way to win. And that's what I took away from the OKC game and opening night. And we have to remember they're without Jalen Williams, who was an all NBA player last year with a wrist injury that he suffered in the playoffs last year. And what really stands out to me with OKC is their depth. It's literally just the next man up. I mean, there's 3 or 4 players that you're thinking when Jalen does come back is, how is coach going to fit a couple of these guys into the rotation? And then you have, the rookie Nikola Topic, who was out all last season with a knee injury, and he's back in the fold. And then when you dive a little bit deeper, you have to think about all the draft picks that OKC has as well in store. So this is a team that isn't going anywhere. And you see the start that they've had to the season so far, unstained, but SGA is literally just picking up exactly where he left off. And watching that starting five last night, my respect level for him has just gone up a whole different level. This is a guy who really, really wants to be great. And something that he said on that show really stood out with me. He was like, there always has to be a new Bill Gates. There always has to be a new Michael Jordan. So why not strive for that? So, he's in the right headspace. And then you look at the start that he's had so far this season. It's just, obviously we talk about the free throws. He had 26 free throws the other day. But then, in their third game, he barely went to the free throw line, still had 30-plus points. But, he's reached 50 points 5 times since joining the Thunder. That's more than Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, by the way. So he is the head of the snake of that team. He's the engine. And one thing as well is that, availability is the best ability. And he hasn't had many injuries so far in his career. So, the OKC Thunder, the West is already jam packed. It's going to be hard. It's first of all, we haven't had someone repeat in 8 years. So, that's on the table. We know how difficult it is to repeat in NBA. But right now, the way OKC is looking, it's going to be really tough to take these guys down.
Yeah, and I guess touch wood, we'll wish for good health for Shea, but I think that's probably the one thing that really stops this OKC team from going and achieving exactly what they want to achieve, like you say, going back to back this season. One of the things that stood out to me from starting five in particular, Drew, and I'm keen to get your opinion on this as a former player and as a coach at Northumbria now as well, that Shea's methods of training and similar to Wemby, I guess, are really unorthodox his methods of conditioning. We've seen the sort of pictures of him in the gym where he's wearing weighted vests and he's doing like crawling and things and making sure that he's barefoot to build up those foot muscles. You're a former player, so I don't know whether you think some of those methods are too unorthodox and maybe the young heads are just going down a path which is a little bit conspiratorial, or whether you think there could be something in all these crazy methods of conditioning now for the young guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, the old heads like myself would phrase it unconventional, but what's conventional, right? Like it's just a new wave, it's a new era, it's a new way of doing things. There's so much more information in sports science that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And I started to see that transition towards the end of my career. Like, as a basketball player, it was always about specifically in the 90s, because that's the area that I grew up in. And if you look at all those power forwards, Karl Malone, Barkley, Oakley, all those guys were ripped. So now it's changed. I mean, back then I remember it was about putting as many weights, I mean, as many big plates on the bar as you could, and it was all about power. Where now it's about flexibility, it's about body weight, it's about more band work, it's about those little muscles that you ignore, the hips, the glutes, all of those things to try to, solve soft tissue injury, excuse me. It's just things have changed. There's so much more information now out there. And I wouldn't call it unorthodox. I wouldn't call it unconventional. I would just call it the new way. And it seems like it's working.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all very much behind the new wave of these young guys. We're looking for a new face of the league. Ultimately, it's one thing that you and Eric Pierre spoke a lot about on Sports Gumbo is looking for a new face of the league. Shea is Canadian. I don't know if that disqualifies him from potentially being that guy. Maybe it's Tyrese Halliburton. We saw Shea's OKC Thunder come up against a Halliburton-less Indiana Pacers team, and as you mentioned, the 26 free throws is the thing that has caused a lot of discourse online from Shea. And I'm sort of struck, particularly watching starting five again. I'm not sure how much we'll reference that throughout this season, but it's such a good insight into what goes into the psyche of these players. Because another guy who's surprised me really, and I'm a Clippers fan. James Harden is a Clippers guy, of course, at the moment, but getting that insight into James Harden's personality is surprising, because he's someone who I think it was Young Thug who said, like, James Harden is just not on the internet. He's not a guy who I really think you see very much of his personality. You see that he's outgoing and maybe clubbing too much, and that's another thing you get a little bit of insight to in starting five. But you don't necessarily get to see how James Harden conditioned himself down the years and how he still manages to get himself into the All-Star game and on all NBA honors lists last season. But James Harden is a guy who's come in for a lot of criticism in his career. Again, Drew, referencing your Rockets, you think back to Rockets era, James Harden. I remember the discourse around him then was that he wasn't a good defender. He was a foul baiter. People didn't appreciate his game, and I think they sort of overlooked the excellence that James was able to put on the floor night in, night out around those times, especially considering some of the lifestyle choices, let's say, for James around that time. Do you think we're in danger of falling into that with Shea a little bit now? Obviously taking away that sort of outgoing side, because you can see that Shea is sort of, wholesome family man. He really does have that sort of like family oriented vibe about him. That's what comes through in starting five. He seems like someone who's so committed to his craft and won't let anything distract from that? And do you think we're in danger of overlooking that excellence? And the thing I always come back to, and maybe this is me, feeling a little bit protective of Shea because he was a Clippers draft pick. I sort of think like the foul baiting, one of the things we sort of discount when we have these conversations about it is it's a skill in and of itself. It makes you harder to defend. Shea is a slippery guy. He's a quick guy. He's a guy that you can't get too close to because he will get the foul, but also stand back from Shea and hand down, man down at your own risk, really.
Yeah, it's part of the game, right? It's just like the three-pointer. People complain about the threes, but it's part of the game. Foul baiting or whatever you want to call it, getting to the free throw line is an art. Shea is really herky jerky. He does a great job at keeping the defense off balance. And so a lot of times if defenders are unable to stay on their feet and you throw them a little pump fake, you throw your body into them and draw a foul. That's the NBA. That's the rules of the game. And so if you can get to the line, if you look at the history of the game and you look at all the superstars, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, you go down the list, just Google, free throw attempts in history. You will see all the top scorers have always been able to get to the free throw line. And that's the best way to get your rhythm, right? So that opens up your jump shot. If your jump shot isn't falling, what do coaches say? Get a layup or get to the free throw line. So if you're able to do it 26 times, then why not? Be more disciplined defensively if you want to see that. So I don't throw criticism his way when it comes to his style of play. There's many styles of playing, and that's just his style, and it's getting the job done, and no one has been able to stop it. And until they can, then keep it going.
Absolutely, keep it going. Do we think there's a world where he wins back-to-back MVP and takes OKC to back-to-back titles? I mean, there's going to be guys around the league, maybe even Wembanyama, who have just been talking about there, who I think are going to try and have something to say about that. I don't see a world in which the Spurs win the title, but maybe they could make some in-season moves that can force them closer to that. Maybe I'm just underestimating how much of a force Wembanyama can be in this league. We've seen definitely in the past. You think back to those early Warrior teams under Steph Curry, and they had great role players around Steph, but Steph was the the real genuine star on those teams. And it wasn't to say that Klay Thompson couldn't have himself an all-star and all NBA night and that kind of thing, but maybe that's what De'Aaron Fox can do. Maybe it's what some of those young guys, Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, can do. But I'm struggling to see a world in which OKC don't retain this title. Nikola Jokic, I imagine, will have something to say about whether Shea can win back-to-back MVPs. I think there's a lot of voters fatigue with MVP as well, and sometimes, unfortunately, reputation does come into it there. And we've spoke about Shea's reputation as a guy who is maybe a grifter to get to the free throw line now and stuff. As much as some of us are going to disagree with that, I think it is a thing that unfortunately comes into voting intentions. So which way do you see that going, Drew, or is it just too early to say? Because I mentioned it before, and we'll continue to sort of cross everything that there are no major health issues to any more stars, because we've seen too much of that over the summer, and we're going into a season without Tyrese Halliburton and Jason Tatum, at least for a large part of it now, and even Fred VanVleet, if you want to throw in his title aspirations with the Rockets. Do we see a world in which Jokic can disrupt Shea's reign for MVP? A world in which anybody around the league can stop them winning back-to-back titles?
Well, I think it's going to depend on team success, right? And for a fact that OKC is going to be up there again.
Yeah.
But when you look at the other suspects, there's a lot of question marks, right? Of course, Jokic individually will always have his name in the MVP, but how well will the Nuggets fare this season? Although I think their roster is better than last year, so I think he can compete with it. You got to look at Luka as well, but then again, you got to start thinking like, will Luka meet the 55-game threshold? He's already been named last night that he's going to miss a week with the leg injury and a hand injury. So will he even play enough games? Will the Lakers even be good enough? We shall see there. Across on the East, you look at Giannis. Again, he's putting up monster numbers to start the season. But how well will the Bucks do this year? There's been a lot of question marks surrounding that team, even though they've gotten off to a good start. And then obviously Wemby, who we spoke on earlier, who's off to a monster start to the season. But then again, there's so many question marks. There's question marks around every team. But when you look at OKC, I think that's the one team that you could say for certain, without a doubt, is going to at least be top 3 in the West. But then again, you look at the individual numbers. I'll ask you, 3 games into the season, he's averaging 40 points, 5 assists, and 6 rebounds. But then, more importantly, like he's just getting better. He's only had 5 turnovers in 92 plus minutes this year, which is a turnover every 20 minutes. So he's taking care of the ball as well. So he's just off to a flawless start. And I think most importantly, he has that mindset, right? That mindset to where he wants to be that guy. He wants to be the greatest ever. He wants to be the best. And I get no inkling from him that he's content off the success that his team had last year. For me, I would just like to see an American get it. It's been since 2018, since James Harden was the last American to get MVP. And then, even crazier, it's been since 2021 since an American has even been in the top 3 of the MVP voting. So come on, Ant-Man, you got to step your game up. I know he went out last night with a tight hammy, but you got to represent for us. Come on now.
Absolutely. I guess this is where my European hat comes into play a little bit more. I'm almost feeling a bit like Ryder Cup aftermath here, Drew. I'm happy to see the European guys just continue to dominate and take it home. Maybe one day we'll get an English guy up there. Who knows? Who knows? Stranger things have definitely happened. Well, unfortunately, at the moment there are some strange things going on off the court in the NBA as well, Drew. And we'd be sort of remiss if we didn't address some of these issues that are happening off the court. There's obviously been the Kawhi Leonard aspiration stuff over the summer, which has dominated a lot of my thoughts as a Clippers fan, like whether it will have short-term repercussions for the Clippers. I've sort of said in my own content since that I don't necessarily mind if it has long-term repercussions for Kawhi, because I think the Clippers are getting themselves into a situation where they get all the money off their books in 2027 anyway. So as long as that is beyond this season, Kawhi has a very tradable contract in the summer. I don't see a reason why the Clippers couldn't, not get that James money back on the books, get Kawhi's money off the books, and start to look at whatever is the next iteration of their core. But it feels like there are going to be, deeper repercussions now with this FBI gambling probe, and we've already seen 2 of the names that have come out and been indicted. There's a few more sort of, I guess, assumed names based on the profiles of guys that are coming through in these reports. I think I've said this whenever I've spoke about the Kawhi stuff. Like, I'm not going to claim to be any kind of legal expert here. I don't know what the legality is of all of these things are. We've seen that Jonte Porter has already been, basically banned from the league for life for his involvement in these things. I believe that he's also now come out in dispatches and said that he basically got himself involved with the wrong guys. With hearing that a lot of these things have ties to the mafia, which is, I guess scary for the guys who are involved in that, because that is a deep world that I can't even begin to comprehend. But the 2 names that we have seen come up is Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups, and the Chauncey name in particular is one that I think is going to have serious shockwaves around the league. That's a head coach, that's a Hall of Fame guy. If it was just Terry Rozier, you can, no disrespect to Terry Rozier, but you can maybe just sort of gloss over that. I don't think you can gloss over a guy in Chauncey Billups who has a ring with the Detroit Pistons, is the coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, who are not necessarily an up and coming force in the NBA, but a young team with Damian Lillard back in situ there as well, and now Thiago Splitter is the interim head coach while Chauncey goes through this investigation. So many repercussions for this, Drew. I'm keen to get your sort of initial reaction when you saw and heard this news.
My raw reaction, honestly, was sadness, because it's been so much hype around this NBA season with all the new network deals that has come in. And, for me being in the UK, I feel like the NBA is more accessible now. I already have NBA League Pass, but to be able to see it on Prime, and it's just, which I already have, so to be able to see it on my television, and obviously me excited, getting ready for my role, and then to be slammed with this on the eve of the NBA after there was a great opening night. The timing was just horrible. And I think, as you mentioned before, there's 450 players in the NBA. So if it's one player, you can kind of sweep that under the rug. We've had gambling pros before, not necessarily with the NBA, but we've had it with the NCAA, where guys are fixing games, throwing games. That's not a new phenomenon, but it's just when the coach when Chauncey's name was thrown in there. First of all, I grew up watching Chauncey Billups. Have always been known as a leader of men, a champion with the Detroit Pistons, now a coach with the Portland Trailblazers. The poker thing is one thing aside. I mean, although you read about that, it's just like, wow, you're going to that lengths of trying to rape people's finances. They say they have the infrared goggles and all these cameras and stuff of cheating people in these illegal poker games. That's one thing aside. But then, when it's known that he's tipping people off of, who he's going to sit, it just really, really stings when it's the coach, when it's an active coach, when it's the head coach. I think it's even I think if it's an assistant coach or if it's someone on the bench, you can kind of almost sweep it under the rug, but you can't when it's the head coach. And then, this obviously it makes matters worse because you had the Jonte Porter thing last year. And although he was probably the 40th player in the league of importance, but then also we dealt with the Malik Beasley thing, which currently he still doesn't have a job. And so, my initial reaction was sadness. And the only question I came out asking is how many more? And it's tough, right? Like a lot of people have criticized the NBA with getting into bed with, these gambling companies, but I don't really blame them because no one in the NBA has complained about the skyrocketing salaries. In 2027, Wemby's going to be up for a 4-year, $480 million extension. And that has to do a lot with these new partnerships that the NBA has brought in. And it's just not the NBA, it's everywhere. I mean, you look at FIFA, you look at NFL, all of these major associations are in the bed with gambling companies. So I can't just point my finger and say, oh, you shouldn't do that and be upset with that, because I look at it the same with, alcohol companies. I mean, think of how long that they've been in bed with Bud Light and Budweiser and all these companies. And I just think that, your vice is your vice, and it doesn't make it better that it's all in front of your face all the time. But I can't be mad at the NBA for trying to grow the game and trying to, beef up the pockets. Obviously I can ask a question and how can you regulate it more? That's the only thing that I can ask. But I mean, it's just sadness because there's so many great performances, and it's kind of taken away from the excitement that we had in week one.
Yeah, and it's hard not to sort of ignore the rise of sports book gambling in American sports and the impact it's having. We've seen, literal on-court arguments with fans sat courtside accusing players of ruining their parlays and things like that. And it's people are always going to look to that whenever these kind of gambling probes go on, and we hope there are not too many more of them, as you say, Drew. We hope that this basically brings tighter regulations, and I want to come on to what it means for Adam Silver and his sort of legacy as the commissioner in the next sort of section of this. But like, I think the rise of gambling stuff has some merit. I'm not going to sit here and be a hypocrite. I've written for SB Nation before, and they've been DraftKings sponsored pieces, and I've written what I think my prop bets and over unders and things are for the evening. So I have also been a part of that world. Well. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not a prolific gambler. I probably put a bet on the odd horse race here and there in the UK, but besides that, it's not something that I delve too deeply into. I would say there is some merit to the rise of sportsbook gambling being, a lead up in the causation of these kind of things happening. But then, you look at the Chauncey case. Chauncey's getting involved in illegal poker games, which has, nothing to do with sportsbook gambling. So there is, I think, a danger that you're pointing towards the wrong things. Ultimately, Chauncey's situation sounds like it's getting in too deep with the wrong crowds. You could argue that's the same thing, and that's what Jonte Porter has pointed towards. Whether that just feels like it's mitigation for his own case or not, I guess is by the by now. Really, that guy is out the league and probably will never touch a floor in the NBA again. And that's maybe what Terry Rozier's looking at now. I'd be interested to see what the future is for Malik Beasley, who the NBA have absolved effectively of this, but they also absolved Terry Rozier once upon a time. So this again falls back to sort of looking at the NBA and their regulations around this, that if they are going to go and recruit this extra money, which I guess I'm not going to argue with in the sense that it creates in some ways a better product for me. I would like fans to not be taking out losing their parlays on players because I just think that is corny behavior to be honest. But there are always going to be unfortunately corny and very vocal minorities of fans in any sport, like you say, Drew. And there's sportsbook gambling and issues around that in any sport. We've seen it in football, and guys fixing games, not necessarily at the highest level, but guys when they make transfers, tipping off their friends about where they're going to make the transfer to and stuff. So this kind of thing goes on. I guess it's about now making sure that future people who potentially are getting involved with the wrong crowds and with the wrong people, and future people who are involved in gambling probes, or at least have the opportunity to be involved in gambling rings, are deterred from this by guys that are involved now having the book thrown at them.
Yeah, I just think the punishment has to be the message for anyone involved in gambling as a active player, active coach, anybody that's on a associated with the team. It has to be the Pete Rose treatment. Like, it's one and done. Like, you're done forever. So if we come to hear Terry Rozier, tipped off or was involved in any capacity, it has to be a done deal. And that's the same with Chauncey. I'm not sure that you can really link up the illegal poker games. If it's just the poker games with Chauncey, I'm not sure, because to me, I kind of look at that as a separate entity, although it's awful what you hear, but that's different. Obviously there's some punishment there, but I don't think it requires him being booted from the NBA because it's not a direct correlate with the NBA. But if somehow there is, if he's tipped off, whoever it is, that, he's going to be sitting guys for whatever reason, then, you as a coach, you have to be gone as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds. It's going to absolutely change the landscape of, these professional leagues moving forward, and which way we'll see. Like I say, the gambling aspect of it isn't going anywhere. The relationships, I don't believe, is going anywhere. It's just too much money. I just think there has to be, I say, harsher punishments. I mean, there hasn't been any examples as of yet, but whoever receives the punishment, they have to be, Adam Silver has to send the message that this cannot be done.
And you mentioned the name Adam Silver there. Do you think what happens next between this and I guess the Kawhi and Clippers aspiration situation, rhyming accidentally there, could be make or break for his legacy as a commissioner? There's definitely a lot of discourse online now about that, about the All-Star game being at Intuit Dome and what potential repercussions that has of Adam Silver, getting into bed with Steve Ballmer, I guess, around this. Steve Ballmer has come out and completely refuted the accusations from the Clippers side, and I'm not naive enough to think that that's definitely going to be the case. I think a lot of that kind of stuff does go on in sports. Again, it's a thing that we've seen in football where sponsors have direct links to ownership, or sponsors sort of inconspicuously not necessarily real companies, or at least that's what the allegations are in a lot of these cases. We see it with the aspiration thing that it was a fraudulent tree planting company. The CEO of Aspiration has been arrested and charged with corporate fraud, pleaded guilty to corporate level fraud to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. So maybe there is a chance that Kawhi and Steve get off on the idea that this guy was already a fraud and has been fraudulent towards Kawhi and the Clippers in this situation. But if these allegations that Pablo Torre from The Athletic has come out with are true, then again, similar to with this gambling probe, Adam Silver is going to have to come out here and be as ruthless as possible, because ultimately this is about deterring other teams from getting the same idea, deterring other players from being a part of under the table deals, and going back to the gambling probe, deterring other players from getting involved in that, or other coaches in the case of the allegations around Chauncey Billups from getting involved in that. I'm always torn a little bit on Adam Silver's legacy as a commissioner, and I guess the role of a commissioner in general. People look back and have very different thoughts on David Stern's legacy as a commissioner now. I don't know how many dissenting voices there were at the time around David Stern. You can probably give me a better insight into that, Drew, because you were over in the States at the time. I was a little bit younger when David Stern was the commissioner. The main things I remember are, the vetoing of the Chris Paul trade. Of course, there's the untold Netflix documentary now around the referees and their sort of involvement with mafia and gambling probes and all those kinds of things. So, David Stern, I wouldn't say his legacy is exactly flawless as an NBA commissioner. I think there were allegations of wrongdoing on his part as well before he passed and Adam Silver took over the reins. But I just am sort of left wondering now, with the league getting to the point where has Adam Silver's time as a commissioner hit its ceiling anyway? Like, is it time for us to see a new commissioner that can kind of lead us into this new era of the NBA, particularly where it pertains to, sportsbook gambling and things like that? Because effectively a new guy can come in, kind of clean slate, and be like, right, I'm zero tolerance on all these kinds of things. If any of you thought or alleged that Adam Silver could be too in bed with a guy like Steve Ballmer, or too far down the rabbit hole of the gambling side of things, that it's hard for him to throw the book at guys. Well, me as the new commissioner, let's imagine Joe Bloggs in this situation as the new commissioner. I don't have to put up with any of that. Like, I can throw the book and come down hard on all of you.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if you're looking at it from the micro perspective, if you're looking at it from the macro, you also have to look at all the positives that Silver has done. I mean, look at the NBA now. Look at how global it is. You got regular season games happening all around the world. You see these contracts. I mean, you go back to 2010 where, Kobe was the highest paid player and his contract was, 20 something million a year. And now you got role players making that. So just in less than 20 years, the salaries have more than doubled. And you look at, how many positions, when I was growing up, a kid's dream was to make the NBA as a player. Now there's so many other avenues into the NBA. It's just expanded. So, I think that's harsh. I mean, if you're talking about, having him relieved of his position, I feel like that's a little harsh. No matter who's in the position, if you're getting into bed with gambling companies, this type of stuff was inevitable. I think he's going to be more known of how he handles it moving forward. The Kawhi situation is, I just look at the players and everyone surrounding it, and I haven't really seen any players, or you see even Mark Cuban come into Bombers' rescue around it. I haven't seen a lot of negativity from the player side of things. So it just makes me wonder, like, is this a regular occurrence, or is this something that players think, yeah, too right? Because obviously there's a salary cap in the NBA, which is something you don't have in, professional soccer. And you just look at Golden State, for example, right? So, Golden State was purchased for $450 million. Today, they're worth anywhere between $9 and $11 billion. Now, I'm going to ask you, who do you think is responsible for that?
The ownership, I guess.
Steph Curry.
Right.
Steph Curry's responsible.
Oh, sorry, who's
for
responsible for getting the money? Right. I thought you meant who's
Steph
responsible for
Curry
paying it.
is responsible for them being worth that much. So then
Yeah,
you look at how
absolutely.
much Steph Curry's earned in his career. Less than $400 million. Now, I say only. Obviously, that's a lot of money. But when you compare that percentage to what the owners make, and I know the owners are the owners, but why doesn't someone like him or LeBron deserve an extra bite of the pie? Now, I understand that it's against the rules, but it just makes me think of is this a common thing around the NBA, of these under the table deals? And if it is, it's like, okay, I mean, if there's a handshake of you getting involved with the sponsor of the team just to put some extra money in your pocket, even though it's unethical, even though it's under the not against the rules, I mean, it's a tough thing. I mean, basically, it's tough for me to just put all of this on Adam Silver. I think for me, his legacy is going to be more about how he handles this moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess his legacy may be remembered kind of for not necessarily vetoing the Luka Doncic trade, or wherever you stand on the sort of conspiracy with the Cooper flag to the Mavs
Oh
thing.
yeah.
I
I mean,
think I
we can
think
go
I'm
back. We can go back to Patrick Ewing and the New York Knicks, them getting the
yeah.
number one pick. I mean, who knows what happens behind closed doors with all of these things, right? We don't know. I'm pretty sure that there's a little fiddling going on with everything, right?
Yeah.
We
And I
would be
think I'm
naive not to think so.
Oh, of course, and I think I'm on the side of you, Drew, because I've heard you and Eric talk about this before as well. I don't necessarily buy into the conspiracies, or if I believe there is some sort of underhand tactics going on from some ownerships and stuff. Because listen, these guys are billionaires. You don't get to be a billionaire without crushing a few bugs along the way. And unfortunately, when you're a billionaire, the bugs are sort of common people like me and you, Drew, who earn a hard working salary and don't necessarily get to sit on top of ivory thrones and courtside at loads of NBA games and stuff. So who really knows? I would rather not probe too deeply into that and continue to enjoy basketball. So we'll flip back to that, Drew. We'll flip back away from the murky underworld of the NBA because I want to talk about something we're going to do as a little bit of a regular segment here on the Crossover the Pond podcast, where we look at a kind of understated story of the week. We've especially spoken about some of the big talking points around the league there, and I mentioned that we're going to try and mix it up week to week and make sure that we're covering all teams and as many players as we can, as many different storylines as we can. You mentioned before, Drew, NBA news moves so fast. We have a saying here in the UK about it being yesterday's chip paper, because traditionally when we used to eat our fish and chips, it would be in yesterday's newspaper. So all of these things, the news moves so quick. Things me and Drew have spoken about today could all be blown out the water by this evening when another slate of games comes around. But I want to sort of try and focus on some of the more heartfelt stories, some of those understated stories, some of the stories you may have missed throughout the course of the week. So Drew, the way I wanted to do this is to sort of pick one individually, keep it a surprise to each other. We've got a written agenda out besides that, so we kind of know exactly what we're going to talk about week to week. But this is the bit where I wanted to keep it a surprise. So I'm keen to come to you first and see what your understated story of the week is.
Well, my understated story of the week is what you're going to start hearing is right now we're going to go down to Georgia. We're going to go down to the ATL, shouty, with the Atlanta Hawks, a team that we wouldn't probably talk much about, right? So do not be surprised if you start hearing Trae Young's name in trade rumors very, very soon, because right now the Atlanta Hawks with Porzingis and their great young core, there's a lot of expectations down there, especially in the weaker East. But right now, Atlanta's off to a poor start, 1-2 to start the season. Trae Young is in a contract year, did not get offered that extension, and you can kind of understand why. A smaller guard who has yet to prove that he can contribute to winning at the highest level. Although he did take the Atlanta Hawks to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years ago, but do you invest all in that money into a 6-foot point guard who has a lot of usage? So I would not be surprised if you start hearing his name pop up in trade rumors as early as next week.
Oh, interesting. He's someone that I've got my eye on as a potential future Clipper as well. Drew, I mentioned Clippers looking towards getting off all of that money. It coincides with a free agency Trae Young year, so who knows? Maybe that's something I'll be watching an Intuit Dome in the not so distant future. I've sort of thought about a couple of different angles I can take with this. I almost thought about going down the LeBron and the Lakers route, because even though the LeBron and the Lakers are two of the biggest talking points in the NBA, I'm actually surprised at how little coverage this sort of start to the Lakers season being as I guess poor as it's been in terms of LeBron's involvement. There's been rumors of LeBron not being as sort of active courtside and involved in games there. You mentioned
He was in game
Lucas.
two. Game one, he was very stoic, didn't have one
Yeah.
hand clap. But then in game two, I noticed that he was more engaged with the team, specifically when they played Minnesota. So for whatever reason, I actually took that with a grain of salt because
Yeah.
I assume that he has sciatica, right? That's not an injury that you can be jumping up and down with. I mean, it doesn't hurt if you clap. I've dealt with it before, and even clapping can kind of flare it up. So I took that with a grain of salt, him being stoic and sitting there on his high chair. So I didn't read much into that. Carry on.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Maybe it's me and my Clippers hat on, trying to find
Yeah,
a
you're
little bit of devil in
trying to
the
wedge
details
something
there.
in there, mate.
Anyway, that's not what I'm going to take. I'll maybe throw that in as an honorable mention. I want to give an honorable mention to the Chicago Bulls as well, because I watched a Kenny Beecham, the king of the fourth quarter, Kenny Beecham video from preseason, where he talked about his Chicago Bulls and his fan base in Chicago maybe being one of the most miserable in the NBA, and they're off to a 2-0 start. I quite like that young core. It's a kind of directionless franchise in a sense that I don't think that ownership are heavily invested in bringing that team any kind of success. Billy Donovan is in a strange place as a coach. Really, he was a former successful coach with the Oklahoma City Thunder and a successful coach at college level too, but hasn't necessarily found that success with the Chicago Bulls. Again, sort of feels like he's part of that, I guess, kind of rudderless direction that franchise was going in. But then you look at some of the young guys on that team now. Josh Giddey is someone who's managed to, reform his reputation. He had that big moment against the Lakers last season too. Matas Buzelis is someone that I'm very high on as a young guy. Kobe White, I became a bit of a sneaky UNC fan when I was at university with the first March Madness I watched, which was the Kobe White and Cam Johnson UNC team. So he's someone I'm always going to have my eye on. But Drew, I've cycled through a few there. I'm just giving fans a little bit of a taste of the kind of stories that they can come on to. The one I want to talk about is VJ Edgecombe, and people may think that that's not necessarily an understated story. He breaks a record on that first night, hitting 40 points for the Philadelphia 76ers. I think the Philadelphia 76ers may fly under some people's radar a lot this season because people are sick and tired of the Joel Embiid narrative. People are, I think, sick and tired at this stage. At least I definitely am, of the Paul George narrative and any sort of aspirations around those two guys of being healthy stars on a winning team. I look more towards that young core of that Philadelphia 76ers team again, led by Tyrese Maxey, who is somehow a veteran on that roster now, which just is something that doesn't really compute in my head because Tyrese Maxey is definitely not a veteran to my mind. That is still a guy who is a rookie or a sophomore. He's not someone who is 6 or 7 years into his NBA contract, but it seems that he is, and it seems like there's guys like VJ Edgecombe who are coming to the fore now, and guys like VJ Edgecombe are my favourite kind of stories in the NBA where, it's guys who come from real working class backgrounds, real hardship. There's the video of him at the draft talking to Taylor Rooks where he's talking about, his family living off a generator for 7 years, genuine hardship story, gets to make it to the NBA and, immediately when you're on a rookie contract with the NBA, you're on millions of dollars. We've seen it so many times where that kind of money can, I don't want to necessarily say corrupt players, but you even look at like a guy like Johnny Manziel over in the NFL, and we've seen what this money can do the minute that you make it to the league. That can be some people's made it moment and can make them switch off and take their eyes off the ball. And listen, I'm not saying that VJ Edgecombe still doesn't have the potential to do that. It's one game or a couple of games for him with the Philadelphia 76ers so far, but to come into the league and have that kind of hungry mentality of, I came from a family living off a generator for 7 years, to put up 40 points in your first game and to be on a team who, listen, the Philadelphia 76ers, as much as anybody in the league right now, I think need to go and bust some narratives wide open. So I'm not going to lie, Drew. I found that VJ Edgecombe story really, really heartwarming. It made me go back and watch that video at the draft, and I was almost a bit misty eyed. Like I thought someone must have been chopping onions in the room I was in at the time, because I find things like that absolutely incredible. It's part of the reason I am a fan of sports. Ultimately, is to see those kind of stories come to the fore.
Yeah, I mean, VJ Ashcombe is just straight out the gate, right? Just a guy who is playing with a chip on his shoulder and is hungry. So it just goes to show that what we saw on draft night wasn't a show. You come out during your first game, you put up 34 points, and just the aggression that he comes out with, you could tell this is a kid that's playing for his livelihood, and you love to see it. And there's a perfect opportunity for him because with Joel Embiid on a minute restriction, McCain is still out with that. I think it's a hand injury. So obviously he's in the starting lineup. It's him and the Maxi show, and it's gonna be hard to there is a new era coming in Philly, and we're seeing it before our eyes. And this is without Paul George. This is without Joel Embiid, and it's about the young guys that's coming in. So shout out to VJ. Great story and a great start to his NBA career.
Absolutely, yeah. It's hard not to sort of fall onto the stereotypes with a guy like VJ Edgecombe, but he has that sort of street baller factor about him. Really, I've got the Allen Iverson on the shirt that I'm
Yes.
repping today, and that's the kind of guy that I love, who has that sort of, you mentioned the chip on the shoulder, that street baller mentality that I can go at any guy on any night, and I can, I can claim some scalps out here, and I expect a lot more of that from VJ this season. So shout out to him, shout out to the young guys who are coming through. To round off, Drew, I want to do one bold prediction for the week ahead. I feel like this could be quite a funny segment to do over the course of the season because, as I say, the stories move so quickly in the NBA. Things change so quickly that you can be made to look a fool at times. I expect there are going to be moments where me and you are made to look like fools. I expect there's going to be some moments where we're both sat here proud as punch at the predictions that we made week to week. I'll go first for mine this time since I went last on the Understated Story one. I'm going to stick with the Chicago Bulls. I think we'll be sat here next week with the Chicago Bulls having just beaten the Knicks in back-to-back games. There's an NBA Cup game there in the
Okay.
Garden. The Chicago Bulls have beaten the Orlando Magic and the Detroit Pistons so far, who were two playoff teams from last season. They've got the Hawks and the Kings in the next two games. I could see the Bulls still being unbeaten by the time that we're sat here, and maybe some people are going to have to be scratching their heads wondering if they've got the Chicago Bulls figured out all wrong. I'm keen to know your bold prediction and what you think about the madness of my prediction.
Yeah, I mean, just slow your brakes down a little bit. I mean, it is it is the Chicago Bulls we're talking about, right? But I love it though. I love it. We all love a great story in the NBA, and someone has to be the story, right? So why not the young Bulls? But I think this Cinderella story is coming to a short end as we start to get into the flow of the NBA season, which takes me to my bold prediction within a week. Now, on Friday, the Los Angeles Lakers were starting a tough stretch where they had 8 games in 13 days. Obviously, there's no LeBron. It was just mentioned yesterday that there's no Luka. But look at there. Austin Reeves, 51 points, and the Lakers get the job done. So my bold prediction is when you and I get back in this chair, the Los Angeles Lakers will go undefeated in this streak without Luka and LeBron. So we look at their schedule coming up. They got Portland on the road tonight. Then they're in Minnesota. No, I'm sorry, they're at home against Portland tonight. Then at home away at Minnesota. Then they got Memphis on Halloween, and then on Sunday they host the Miami Heat. And I say they go 4-0 during that stretch, and Austin Reeves starts to hear the cha-ching, 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 and that offer that he was offered for the Los Angeles Lakers is a slap in the face. And it's a good thing that he did decline it. He is about to get PAID, paid. Lakers going undefeated this week. Book it.
True, I know we're doing this early in the morning. I feel like I need to splash some virtual cold water in your face there. You think the Lakers can take the Timberwolves at Target Center? Really? Come
Hey,
on,
dude.
man. No
Hey,
way.
Anthony Edwards, I'm going to assume he's going to miss that game with his hamstring, and the universe is just going to align for the Lakers to come out. And then guess what it will cause? No excuses by LeBron. All these conspiracy theories of him sitting out so he can see what the team is going to look like, which is BS, by the way. But nevertheless, he's going to come out really encouraged and excited about a team that he will be joining in mid-November.
Yeah, I think that the Timberwolves let the Lakers get one. They can't let them get another, let alone on their own floor. I always think that Rudy Gobert is that kind of guy where, whenever you want to write off Rudy Gobert, he finds a way to prove you wrong. I'm asking you, Rudy Gobert, can you do something for me? Because I need Drew's prediction to not come true. I would like the Chicago Bulls instead to go unbeaten this week. But that's going to do it for our first episode of Crossover the Pond. It's been fun. We had a nice fun ending there. Some meaty topics in between. But I want to give a bit of a nod to your former co-host, Drew, Jay Marriott, a good friend of both of ours from the Drew and Jay pod days, and say, Drew, lead us out.
Hey, well, we appreciate all of you out there across the pond or across the world that's joining us. Make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment, engage with us on social media. We are a show of the fans, and so we would love to feature any questions or any topics that you may have. But we appreciate everyone's support. And hey, this is just the beginning. We want all of you guys to come along this ride with us, grow with us as we continue to get better and better and deep dive into the NBA topics across the pond. But until then, myself, Josh Sexton, we sign off. Say peace. See you next week.